Well, I kind of mentioned earlier, I stepped in it a little bit. When we got back into the Gospel of John, I got into verses 1 to 11 of John 15 and thought, back in July when I was putting this all out, yeah, we can do that in one message, and I know better, and I was going, oh, maybe not. So I hit on the first, few verses of John 15, knowing I was going to have to come back, and then Tom taught on the next next set of verses, and he was like, I know he says that I asked him to do 2 weeks. The truth of the matter is, he has the same disease I have, and he was going through, he's like, yeah, I can't teach this in 1 week either, and so he taught it in a couple of weeks, so thanks to him for that. And, so we're getting back to the verses we previously talked about, and actually I'm going to add another message off of that, so we'll get to that later, because just inspiration hit. It's just the way it works. And so, but as we go through this, we come to these words just to get us back into the context a little bit. Is really important for what Jesus is teaching at the beginning of John 15. Jesus is in the upper room with his disciples, and he goes through that whole process that we went through in 13 and 14, and then now he says at the end of chapter 14, he says, rise, let us go from here. And so as they get up and they go, they're heading eventually to the garden where Judas would betray Jesus. They're on their way to that place. And as they step out and they're on their journey, possibly they were passing by some grapevines, which would have been a very common scene there. They might have also been passing by the temple where there was grapevines on the temple and the symbolism that was there. But Jesus often used outside sources to remind us of spiritual truths. So Jesus makes this statement, the last of the 7 I am statements in the Gospel of John. These different ways of saying he is equal with God in different ways. So this is the last of those 7 where Jesus said, I am, chapter 15 of John, verse 1, I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away, and every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, that it may bear more fruit. Already you are clean because of the word I have spoken to you. As I mentioned last time, this imagery is interesting for Jesus because 7 times in the Old Testament, as God is referring to the people of Israel, referring to them as a vine, it was never really a positive thing. And Isaiah 5 talks about this song of the vineyard where God did all that was necessary in this story. He plants a good vine, he puts up a fence, and he puts in a tower. He does all the things, but when the vine dresser, or when the owner comes back, I should say, he finds nothing but wild grapes. Wild grapes were useless. And there's other times when he refers to the vine in Hosea, he talks about how the grapevine that they were was so abundant and producing so many grapes that they just kind of put their trust in those things. They became idolaters. And so they put all their trust in all the wealth and all the abundance and not in the God who provided. So these ideas that come with in the disciples' ear, that come with it as they're traveling along, Jesus saying, I am the true vine. It's a weighty thing for Jesus to call himself this because he's completing what God had started. Jesus fulfills what Israel could not do. Jesus is the true and faithful planted vine through whom life and much fruit would come. The Jews were no longer these people of a source of support for the blessing of the nations. Now it is Jesus. Jesus is the true vine, true in every respect, true in reality and genuineness. Jesus is the one who would be the one to bring us into lasting and true relationship with God. So Jesus points to the Father's intentional, close, and skillful work as the gardener, as the vine dresser, the master gardener who knows exactly what we need. Removing anything that gets in the way from producing fruit, pruning what is producing fruit that will bear even more fruit and better fruit? The Father knows. The Father knows the branches that are really a part of the vine. The Father knows what branches are like sucker branches, like we trim off. I always have this picture of my blueberry bush, the things that grow up, and they just kind of bust right off. But they just take all the energy, and they're not really a part of the vine. They're suckers. So the instruction Jesus gives us is simple yet profound. An instruction we touched on a little bit. I send it out in notes. If you get the notes on during the week, we see this amazing word, abide in me and I in you. Abide. The instruction is to remain or to stay there, to stay put, to abide, to remain. I promised a few weeks ago as I sent out the sermon that I did a deep dive study in the word abide. Because in these 7 verses, that word, the verb abide, is used in 6 different ways. The language, as we talked about last time, the language of Greek is very descriptive. I love the language. Wish I could read it, but I just use tools that kind of help me get an insight. And so what I did before was kind of rewrote the verses and tried to imply in the verses the different tenses, the aorist, active, indicative, the subjunctive, and all these different voice, moods, and tenses that we don't need to go into right now because we've got helps that help us to unpack it a little bit. But I did a little bit of a rewrite and to make it a little less chunky, a little bit easier to read. But I wanted to read the verses 4 through 10 with kind of a little bit of a definition of what abide looks like in this. And my prayer is that as we read through this, we would see ourselves in it and we would see how it applies to our everyday life. All right? So follow with me, probably up here on the screens because it won't look anything like this in your Bibles. Well, I mean, anyway, whatever. Make this decision today to abide in me with lasting effect, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it chooses to actively abide or abides by active choice, in the vine might read better, neither can you unless you choose to actively abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever personally abides now in me and I in him, it is he that bears much fruit, for apart from me, you can do nothing. If anyone does not choose to actively abide in me, he is thrown away like a branch and withers, and branches are gathered, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you choose today to abide with lasting effect in me, and my words, choosing this day to abide in you with lasting effect. So it's kind of, with the lasting effect, it's kind of like it happens and it has this continued effect. So with lasting effect. There was a day, May 18th, 1990, I was standing, not here, but at an altar, and I was holding my wife's hands, and I said yes. Actually, I was just really glad she did too. Said yes. And we got married that day. We were married once. The marriage ceremony happened once, but we are still joyfully, blissfully married today. Because life's been perfect ever since. Even through it all. So there is this thing that happened, we got married, and there's this lasting effect of being married. That's the whole idea. There's this choosing to abide, and there's this lasting effect, and we'll get into what that looks like, of abiding, right? All right. I don't know where I was, but we'll just jump into verse 8. By this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit, and so prove to be my disciples. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Make this decision today to abide with lasting effect in my love. If you keep my commands, you will abide for certain in my love. Just as I have kept my Father's commands and abide currently and consistently in his love. Does that make sense? There is such a beautiful use of this word through this passage that you could just spend hours and hours and hours in it, just letting it pour over you as you read and understand and picture and see this whole process. I spent a lot of time in this word because of how many times Jesus uses it to communicate this idea, to remain, to stay, to not get sidetracked, but to keep Jesus central. Why would he do such thing? I don't know. I mean, how many other thoughts have you thought in the last 5 minutes besides what I've been saying? Like, oh man, I'm a little hungry. Did I get coffee? I'm not sure. Did I have coffee? Did I put my MCT in? I'm not. Did I? You know, I mean, how many things do we think about? It's so easy for us to get off track. It's so easy for us to get sidetracked. So this whole idea of, Lord, just let it just wash over me. Lord, let me stay in this place of abiding. Verse 5, whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit. For apart from me, you can do. Apart from me, you can do nothing. Apart from me, you can do nothing. And while it sounds like I'm kind of beating to this to death, it's because I am. You know, I've been a Christian a long time. I've been an active part of church in all kinds of different ways for the last 43 years. I've seen a lot over these many years. I don't know how it happened. I'm 35. I don't act even that old. So that's all right. But over these years, I've seen a lot of tragic things. So have some of you. I've seen some powerful things, and probably you, some exciting things, some tragic and painful things. We've experienced a lot of those things. If you've been part of the church for a long time, I mean, I've been in very conservative churches. I kind of grew up in a Catholic church, and Christmas and Easter we'd go a lot, you know, and on those days, and the smells and bells I remember. I've been in charismaniac churches where they're dancing to the same song for 45 minutes. I've been to all of it. How many of you? You've kind of been the gamut, right? One thing I've noticed, and one thing I've struggled with as a pastor, to be honest with you. Can I be honest with you this morning? You're like, yeah, why stop now? We try to do a lot on our own. We try to do a lot on our own. Man, I was great at that as a junior high pastor. I came up with all kinds of things that we did, and we had the money to do it. And we get in hundreds of kids to do this thing. And I remember, I told this story recently to the staff, but I remember we were doing this Wednesday night program, and we were getting tons of kids in, and I remember just doing this thing. Do you remember Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure? You know, Bob and Ted's, whatever. We were doing a spoof off of that, and we were doing all these games, and we had, I don't know how many hundreds of kids there. And all of a sudden, right in the middle of the message, God convicted me. And he said, "Are you telling them enough to know me?" See, we could do the cool thing. We could get tons of kids in. We could be loud. We could have fun. We could... it was great. And we could do that all on our own. But was I telling them enough to know him? So in midstream of sentence, not like they would have ever noticed, I totally changed the subject. And went right into a gospel presentation and gave an altar call. We had kids give their lives to Christ that night. And I realized it was one of those early lessons that I hadn't even really encountered. I had read through John 15, of course, but I hadn't really encountered the truth of it. Abide in me, and as you abide in me, you will bear fruit. We've talked about that a lot. You don't see a lot of apple trees going, oh, an apple, cool. It just naturally bears, because that's what they do. Grapes. Sorry. Just my brain. Because apart from him, we can do nothing. Apart from him, we can't do anything. A lot of good ideas, not necessarily God ideas. But you know what I learned and realized or thought about as I was pondering this idea? It's nothing new, even in the New Testament. Some of the disciples are trying to cast out a demon that only Jesus could. This kind comes out by prayer. They were just trying to do, but Jesus had he had another layer of power, was teaching them in the process. James and John, when they didn't get hospitality by the Samaritans in Luke chapter 9, what did they want to do? They wanted to call down fire and consume these people. You know, that's why they kind of got the name Sons of Thunder. Was that a God idea, or was that just kind of their thoughts? Peter, when he witnessed with James and John the transfiguration where Jesus' body transformed, and there's Elijah and Moses, the giving of the law and the bringing of the Messiah, and there's all this going on, and they see this thing and they're totally transfixed, and Peter's like, boy, it'd be good, let's build a tent to you, to Elijah and to Moses. Jesus didn't even respond to him. Those are the kind of things that often we can do, where we just want to do because somehow we feel like we're human doings rather than human beings. We often try to do things without God. Not even with ill will. We just think that a rolling stone gathers no moss, so we've got to do, right? People are watching. People are looking at me. Am I worthy of doing what I'm doing? Boy, I can absolutely fall into this trap. Am I worthy to do what I do here? Is the church growing fast enough? Is there enough stuff going on? Do we have enough genuine, it's just a trap we can all find ourselves in. But we see something, and it's hanging on a tree, but is it real fruit? I've kind of showed a picture like this before. You want to show that up there, Jim? Can you tell what that is? It's a shoe-growing tree. Did you know they existed? They are so awesome. Some of them, they're just not ripe yet. That's why they look bad. But I've seen that on Machias, see it all the time. Or as Siri likes to call it, Machias. I love watching that. And then there's this tree, too, that I love, right? The Christmas tree. It grows the coolest ornaments ever, right? No. The tree looks really pretty, but they do not grow ornaments. Sorry. Surprise to all of you. But it's a way that we judge a lot of things, isn't it? The Bible says that man looks at the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart, right? But just because it's hanging from the tree, it doesn't mean the tree is bearing that fruit. We have to be really wise about that. There's so much more we could go into. I mean, if you've been around the church for a while, you've seen it. You've seen how churches have exploded, and then when something happens to the pastor, the church implodes. Because the church was built on that pastor, on that style of ministry, on that thing. We must learn to abide, to remain, to stay put, to be kept. Part of that abiding means we need to be a patient for the process. And this is a lesson that I'm still learning. And speaking of fruit trees, just a couple of weeks ago, Sandy and I went down to Arizona to help my in-laws, Sandy's parents, Doug and Nancy Storsley, get settled in their place in Surprise, Arizona. One of my favorite things about the house is a fruit tree that's in the back. Do you got a picture of that fruit tree? This is a beautiful fruit tree. Can you see the fruit on it? What kind of tree is that? It looks like a lime tree, but it's not. It's an orange tree. Sometimes we try to pick fruit too soon. We're not patient for the process, right? I knew it was an orange tree, so when I saw it was all green, I knew that they just weren't quite ready yet. But when you look at it, you think, oh, cool, a lime. And so me being me, I did ask for permission to be able to pick some of the fruit. This next picture had a little photo sesh. So I cut one of the oranges open, and it still kind of tasted like an orange, still kind of smelt like an orange. It was really pretty. Not quite, not as juicy, not as pungent as it will be, because when those oranges on that tree are ripe, life-changing. How many of you had oranges right off a tree? They're amazing. And they usually just pull right off. This one was like, ugh! The tree's like, no! But I got it anyways. One of the hard parts about abiding is to trust Him and to wait. One of the hard things about abiding is that we want it now. We want to see it happen now. And sometimes it's happening, and we love how that's happening, but sometimes we just have to trust and be patient. How many have been praying for somebody more than a week? How many have been praying for somebody for a long time, and you're just praying, and you're abiding? It's very difficult to abide sometimes when you're praying for people you deeply, deeply, passionately love. Your kids or relatives or a close friend or your parents or whatever it is, and you're passionately praying for them, and you're just praying and praying. And sometimes when God doesn't show up in the time that you want Him to show up, you're just like, I'm done. Don't give up. Continue to abide. Continue to trust. Because God is at work. We're in a go, go, go culture. A culture that's performance-driven. A culture that you have to wait for. Picturing an earlier conversation I had with Dana, talking about a hunting situation with an angry bear running right at him. But he had to wait till he knew it was time, till he wouldn't miss. Yeah? Sometimes life is like that. You just got to wait. You got to trust the Lord that He's going to provide what you need. Sorry, Dana, I didn't ask you to use your, but I know you, and it's kind of a manly story, so it was okay. It's hard to stay in that place of resting. And I'm not talking about doing nothing, because waiting is not passive. It's something that's very active. If you abide, you're staying with lasting effect in that place. You find yourself into a place of sustaining an identity, and you will bear fruit in that place. It's something that naturally comes when you are a part of the vine. And there's no other way for that fruit to come unless you abide. It's not going to happen unless you abide. You've heard me say it 1,000 times. I'll say it 1,000 more. God doesn't care when you get there. He just cares who you are when you show up. That place of character, that place of trust. Because there will be times when all of that fruit will start appearing, helping your neighbors in need and loving your family and treating with one another with love and concern. There is no other way but then just to wait for the Lord. Because apart from me, you can do no thing. Apart from me, you can do nothing. The evidence of being His is that you abide and the fruit follows. What does it look like to abide? in our lives. It's to keep Jesus in the front of your mind, because you're like, okay, how do I abide? You keep using this word abide. What does that look like? How do I do that? You keep Jesus in the front of your mind as you go about your life each day. That's one way. You keep him in mind. And though it became this thing, the WWJD, what would Jesus do? And it turned into something that people made fun of. But the truth is, really, what would Jesus do? And we talk with him, and we ask, we commune with him, we spend time in his word, and we pray. And one of my favorite ways to pray is with my Bible open, because if I ever get stuck in what to pray for, I got all kinds of things I can pray out loud. I can pray the Psalms with the psalmist. I can pray petitions with Paul as he's praying for the church in Corinth or in Ephesus. I can pray with the Bible, and I always know I'm praying his will. Spending time in worship on your own. I've mentioned this before, but we have such great technology. And I'd encourage you to learn how to use it if you don't know how. Because you can find your song. Like, I love this song. I don't care what song it is, worship song. You type it into something like Pandora or Spotify. I'm a Spotify fan. You type it in and boom, there's like 18 renditions of that song. You can find the kind that you like. And then all of a sudden you can, I know I'm going too fast for you, but you can make stations. And all of a sudden, my point is that you've got access to all kinds of worship music. Yesterday morning, there was this obnoxious guy driving up with this song thundering out his car. As Harold and Luciano and John V were there watching me pull up, because there's this one worship song that was just rocking me. It was just awesome. Loved it. It wasn't a beatbox song, which I started going into, but it was awesome, whatever it was. It was a powerful thing, and I love worship personally. I just really encourage you to foster that, to develop that, to take advantage of it. If you have any questions about how to do that, I'll grab your phone and I'll show you how to do it, because it's easy. And take notes. And once you do it 3 or 4 times, it comes naturally. It's easy. Talking to people about Jesus and what he's doing in your life. You don't have to be cheesy about it. You don't have to use a bullhorn. You don't have to use big signs and slogans, turn or burn, get right or get left. You don't have to do any of that. You can just talk with people like, you know what? I was just amazed by God's creation today. When you're driving through the countryside, seeing the leaves turn, aren't they just blowing your ever-loving mind right now? They're amazing. What an amazing creation by an amazing Creator. Seeking out ways for you to grow specifically. I know that even that kind of sounds like a to-do list, but a quarterback isn't just waiting passively when he's waiting for the ball, right? Middle linebacker, we've used this before. You got Cal Raleigh trying to get another home run. He's waiting, but he's not waiting. He's trying to analyze what pitch is coming to him. He's trying to analyze where he's going to put his bat. He's waiting. So waiting on the Lord is a very active place as we're trusting him, as we're hearing him. All right, you've heard me say that before, but I think it's really important, because it's a very important part of abiding in him. It's what it looks like. And there are people that we know that you've experienced even in your life. You've been to church for very long. They're kind of fair weather fans. They're the people that love to buy the tickets for the Mariners when they're good. They're on the 2013 Seahawks train, but they have left it since they messed up the following Super Bowl. I mean, there's a lot of fair weather fans in the church as well. Not really a part of the vine. They're not abiding in the vine. They're not trusting in Jesus. They're just kind of caught up. They're just kind of caught up in the emotion of it all. And this is what I think it means when in John 15:6, if anyone does not abide in me, he's thrown away like a branch and withers, and the branches are gathered, thrown into the fire, and burned. You know what's interesting, it doesn't say that they didn't bear enough fruit. It said that they're not abiding in the vine. They're not abiding in the vine. If you're not abiding in the vine, you've got nothing going through you that keeps you alive So you dry up. And what does anybody do with branches that are dried up? I mean, they're just nothing, they're good for nothing but to be burned. There is, in its connotation, there is an ultimate judgment that comes from that, but that's not really the point. Jesus is talking so much and repeatedly how important it is to abide and to focus on the abiding. And that's where our heart and mind is that's where we focus on. And it's easy to get caught up on verse 2 or verse 6 of this passage and say, what about those branches being thrown away? I understand there is this point of judgment that's very real, that's true, and that will come because of people choosing not to abide in the vine. And that's a tough thing to say in any culture, but especially in our culture today where truth is relative, and as long as it's true to you, it's true, when it's not really a truth, it's just a story you're telling yourself. Truth comes from God's word, and that truth is what sets us free. So what's it mean to abide in the vine? It means that He is our God, and we're surrendered and we're stuck in a very good way to Him. We're there and we remain in Him because He is the source of all of our life. Man, I've been around the church a while. I've worshiped next to people who are now completely disavowing God, living lifestyles that are anything but godly. I've seen some that I worshiped with, attended church with, are now a part of cults and part of false teaching that is way out of base. So were they ever saved? Were they faking it? Hard to say. I know what I believe theologically, but ultimately it's not a judgment I can make. But the truth is, there's a lot of people, an old preacher used to say they were starched and ironed but never washed. Yeah. But Jesus doesn't spend much time on this. He passes through. And this is where He dwells. Pun intended. If you abide in me and my words abide in you, ask whatever you wish and it will be done for you. By this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit, and so prove to be my disciples, and so display that you are my disciples. I love how Eugene Peterson puts it in the Message. He says, but if you make yourselves at home with me, and my words are at home in you, you can be sure that whatever you ask will be listened to and acted upon. This is how my Father shows who He is. When you produce grapes, when you mature as my disciples. If we want to bring God glory, if we want to have a full life that makes a difference and bears fruit, we need to abide. You can be sure that whatever you ask will be listened to and acted upon. God hears, He knows, and He responds. The motivating factor in all of this is a deep and true love. The kind of love that we long for. The kind of love that only God can fill. Verse 9, as the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I've kept my Father's commandments and abide in His love. Jesus is saying, as you've seen me do what the Father does, you do what I do. As you see me communicate the heart and the passion of God, may you walk out the same that you have seen in me. Jesus has given us an amazing example to follow. Again, the Message says the same verses this way. I've loved you in the way my Father has loved me. Make yourselves at home in my love. If you keep my commands, you'll remain intimately at home in my love. That's what I've done. kept my Father's commands, and made myself at home in him. Tom talked about what the keys of obedience were in relationship and in friendship, in obedience with the Lord. Then John writes this later in his, so you've got the Gospel of John, then not long after, about 10-ish or so years, he writes the letters of John. And he writes this in 1 John chapter 5. Everyone who believes that Jesus is the Christ has been born of God. And everyone who loves the Father loves whoever has been born of him. By this we know that we love the children of God, when we love God and obey his commands. For this is the love of God, that we keep his commands. And his commandments are not burdensome. Let's read that again. For this is the love of God, that we keep his commands, and his commandments are not burdensome. We kind of shudder at the word commandments in the flesh. Like, you must do this, is what we think. But they're instructions. But the instructions are given in such a way that if we didn't follow them, the promises would not follow you. These are commandments not because of some God who's just demanding these things from you. These are commandments because they're instructions we absolutely need in our lives to follow him. Verse 4, for everyone who has been born of God overcomes the world. And this is the victory that has overcome the world, our faith. Abiding in and because of his love, obeying his word, because we love him and he loves us. And it's in this place where we read his word and we put it into practice. We read his word and we learn from the examples. We read his words. Stick to the red letters if you have to for a season. And just know what Jesus has said. There's a big movement among a lot of the young people. It's like, I'm not a fan of church, but I love Jesus. It's like, okay, great. So just spend time in the red letters then. I love John 14, 15, 16, 17. These are all red letters, and they're amazing red letters. And these red letters tell us to remain in him. And when we remain in him, our deepest desires will be fulfilled by his goodness and by his glory. There will be much fruit. And that fruit, by the way, has seeds that bears more fruit. And those grapes was like 50 to 60 grapes, I forget how many are per cluster. There's a lot of them, and each grape has like 2 seeds. So, everything that gets born continues to multiply through you. It's like, I don't know. I've never been one for crowds, but you love your neighbor really well. I don't know. Just had this conversation with somebody who's not really an upfront crowd kind of person, but man, talk about the ones they're invested in. Family members, friends that you're invested in. What kind of fruit? Their fruit becomes your fruit. It came from you as you loved and nurtured and encouraged those ones. Paul uses the example of us as a body. Not every piece of the body has all kinds of glory. Not everything is seen. Some things are internal and they're not seen, but without that beating heart, where would the body be? Without those internal organs, where would the body be? The elbow's not very sexy, but the hand is so cool. I want to be the hand, but you're the elbow. It's like, don't complain about what part of the body you are. Just abide and let him bear fruit through you. Trust him. Gosh, there's so much more. In this last verse, in verse 11, we haven't read yet, we're going to spend all of next week on. Yep, this was the inspiration. These things I have spoken to you, that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be full. It's the first Sunday after Halloween. As far as I'm concerned, it's the beginning of the holiday season. And just focus on joy. is a big deal. So we're going to hit on that next week. But the way to joy is abiding. Worship team, could you come on up here? The way to bearing fruit is abiding. The way to see your deepest heart's desire fulfilled, the reason I know that it comes about by abiding is because your deepest desires are desires God himself put in you. That your life would matter. That everything you did would make a long-lasting effect. Yeah? Abiding. Some of you today may be thinking about ways where it's like, man, I've just been doing a lot of wandering. I've been doing a lot of distraction. Maybe there's been struggles that have come into your life. Maybe there's been some challenges at work, or maybe there's just stuff, maybe just your own wandering heart. My prayer today is that you would abide in him. You would find life and joy in him.